Okay, the room is filling up with attendees, and so all of you who are just joining us now, this is the Orthodontic Learning Series from People in Practice, brought to you by LightForce, and we're going to kick it off right now. But before I hand it over to our hosts, Dr. Leon Klempner and Dr. Andrew Serrano, I just want to say that during the conversation, if questions come up, we do have a Q&A panel that you can put your questions in, and we will address them right after the conversation before the end of the webinar. So if you do have questions, you could populate them in. We will get to them. I will pose them to the doctors after their conversation if there's anything comes up. But during the conversation, if you do have a question, you could put it in there. Don't worry, we'll get to it. So right now, I'd like to, oh, just before I hand it over, this webinar is being recorded, so just to let you know, and a copy of it will be sent out to you after, a couple days after this is done. So just to let you know. All right, handing it over, Dr. Klempner, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Lon. Hello and welcome to another live webinar in the People in Practice Orthodontic Learning Series. If you don't know who I am, my name is Leon Klempner. I am a board-certified orthodontist, retired from clinical practice. I'm currently the current craniofacial orthodontics and the director of ortho for the pedo program at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York. I'm also part-time faculty in the ortho department and CEO of People in Practice and co-host of the Golden Age of Orthodontics. And I'm an all-around nice guy who cares about the future of this profession. So in this learning series, our goal is to explore the topics that are important to you as orthodontists. Today's webinar is part of our advanced technology track, which is sponsored by LightForce, currently the leader in customized orthodontic appliances. And a little spoiler alert, at the end of the webinar, there'll be an opportunity to get a special offer from LightForce. So if you are interested, stay tuned. So I know that some of you are joining us because you're kind of on the fence about LightForce. You heard about it, you're considering it, but you'd like to learn more about it. Maybe you're concerned about the workflow and how it might impact your practice. I also know that some of you that are joining us have already bought in. You're already seeing some of the benefits, but you really want to learn more, particularly from somebody very experienced. So if either of these sound like you, you're exactly in the right place. Because today I'm pleased to have with us Dr. Andrew Serrano. And Andrew, he went to Brown University, did his undergraduate training there, and then got his dental degree and ortho training at Arizona School of Dentistry, where he also got a master's in public health. He's a diplomat of the American Board of Orthodontics, and most importantly for this webinar, he's treated over 1,000 patients using LightForce, so he's got tons of experience. So he's well qualified to talk about LightForce as a indirect bonding system with us today. So let me extend a warm welcome to Andrew. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Leon. It's an honor to be here with you this morning.
Well, great. Thank you. I appreciate that you're here with us. So let's talk about indirect bonding a little bit because as a clinician, I practiced for 38 years and, I dabbled in indirect bonding, as many of you may or may not have. And I found it not really that efficient. At the time, I was using a variety of different materials to bond brackets on models in the lab, which was kind of time consuming. For those of you that are my age or approaching it, we used to use Sugar Daddy, a candy with a wax, number 7 wax spoon, a spatula, put the brackets on, make a tray, and then put it in hot water to wash it out. In any event, it was a lot of work in the lab. And then it did save time in the chair unless I didn't seat the trays properly. And then I was looking at debonding and rebonding. And, bottom line is I abandoned it because it was just, cumbersome. So I wondered if you could maybe share with the rest of our group here what the evolution of indirect bonding, how it's developed, where it is today with LightForce. So could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, certainly, Leon. So indirect bonding in its inception was all about being more efficient and more accurate with the bracket placement, right? And unfortunately, technology at the time in the 70s, when the first indirect bonding was taking place, didn't allow for that to be as efficient as is today. So with the innovations in 3D printing and computer aided design, indirect bonding now is a much more predictable process. With LightForce is able to design the indirect bonding trays for passive removal, so that you reduce the risk of brackets debonding at your indirect bonding appointment, and very accurate bracket positioning. Even when you were placing the bracket on the tabletop on stone models, there's still a lot of opportunity for error. It was done manually. There's a lot of opportunity, human error, and different perception of where the bracket should be in the long axis of teeth. Today, the indirect bonding with LightForce, with the help of the technology, CBCT technology, and intraoral scanning, very accurate, down to microns, tenths of a millimeter accuracy, hundredths of a millimeter accuracy. So it's dramatically improved the whole process.
So, efficiency obviously is the efficiency and accuracy. Without saying, efficiency without sacrificing accuracy seem like, important highlights of moving to a system like this. But could you talk to me a little bit about the workflow? Like, how does it work exactly in your office? I mean, is it like, doing a clean check for Invisalign? I mean, do you
I think we might have had a hiccup on Dr. Klempner's side.
Can
Adri.
you hear me? I'm here.
Yeah, you're still here. I think Dr. Klempner's video froze for a minute.
Well,
I'm
that's okay, Lon. I think I can pick up where
not-
Leon was going with that. So, the exactly, he was like you mentioned, and he just right before he got cut off, Leon was talking about what's the workflow like for manufacturing this indirect bonding, this whole process. And it's no different than the digital workflow that 90% of orthodontists are doing in their practice currently with aligners. Aligner products, really, when Invisalign allowed that to enter the industry, the systems were the foundation for this 3D process was put into motion. So essentially, patients' records, obtaining records, intraoral scans, and then a light plan process, which is very similar to your CAD design that you do for your aligner products on the computer, and then a 3D manufacturing and then a delivery. So the efficiency, because we're using computer aided design, computers can be much more accurate than the human hand and the human eye. And so we're able to very precisely locate the long axis of teeth, but manufacture a product, an indirect bonding product that is very accurate for every individual patient.
So, the efficiency is one aspect of it, and then, there's the accuracy. Um, but with LightForce, it's not just indirect bonding, it's the customization of the brackets as well. So can you talk about the impact of the customized bracket and how that exactly helps in terms of the result?
That's right, Leon. So when you combine the accuracy of indirect bonding and the efficiency of indirect bonding, I mean, we're talking about doing initial bondings in 5 or 10 minutes in a very accurate way. So when you combine that with a custom bracket, that now, because the base is custom, because the entire bracket can be manufactured individually for every patient, you can position brackets on teeth that aren't on the facial axis, that aren't in the center of the tooth. Traditionally, that's where every traditional bracket was designed to be placed, right? Is on the long axis. If you deviated from that position, the prescription in the bracket changed, whether it be for rotation or torque vertically on the tooth, the prescription changed. Whether or not that was clinically noticeable for various factors is questionable, but it did change. So now when we combine indirect bonding with a custom bracket, we're really able to have unlimited possibilities in how we treat every case. I mean, you can set cases up to bond all the teeth initially, and you're not concerned about wire plane. You can bond rotated teeth earlier in treatment since the bracket doesn't have to be on the FA point of the tooth. So it really opens up a lot of possibilities. Additionally, when the bracket is placed correctly at the first appointment, and then the prescription is designed for that individual tooth, you really reduce the amount of round tripping in every case. So that's where you gain a lot of the efficiency in LightForce as a product and in the clinic, is the fact that we're only moving the teeth to the right spot once.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that because, you know, the appeal, I'll put my marketing hat on now because I'm an orthodontist and I'm a marketer. So now I got my marketing hat on. And, you know, when we're counseling our orthodontists about um, content and advertising on Facebook, Google, whatever, all the media that we do use to attract new patients, I talk to them a lot about what's important to the end user, the moms, the people that they're trying to attract, not what's important to you in terms of your efficiencies. They're interested in, do I have to come less? Am I going to get done sooner? I mean, these are the things that are important to decision makers, whether they be adults for themselves or whether they be moms for their kids. But they're interested in these types of things. And I know, you know, we had, talking about adults, we had Chris Benson on our podcast. If you haven't seen, if you don't know about our podcast, you should subscribe, first of all. It's called The Golden Age of Orthodontics. You can get it anywhere. But in our recent episode, it was episode 59 with Chris Benson this year, and we were talking about the future of orthodontics. And he highlighted that the birth rate is going down. And one of his suggestions was that we gear up towards the adult population in terms of getting more adults into the office and getting better treatment acceptance. So talk a little bit about what it means to you, for you to have the technology and the ability to deliver shorter treatment times or fewer appointments, and is that actually the fact? Is it true?
Well, first of all, Leon, great podcast. Thank you very much for doing that. But we were talking a little bit before this webinar started about research, right? In orthodontics, in medicine in general, it can be hard to collect the data that's definitive, gives us an answer clearly. And I think what's really critical to this is that LightForce is trying to produce that. And I think we're starting to see some of the research come out now. This year, several articles were published on the efficiency of a custom bracket with a custom indirect bonding process. And I think what we're seeing is that treatment is about 6 months, 5 to 6 months faster on average, with about 5 fewer appointments for every patient. And so, you can imagine, we can extrapolate what that means for the efficiency of our office. And it's easy for us treating, hundreds of patients a year to understand what that can mean for us. But I think what's really important is that we can now pass that on to our patients. And so when the patients, the expectation, this generation of patients, parents, young patients, and their parents, the adults, is that they want results right now, right? I think we see that it reminds me of that commercial for that annuity. It's my money and I want it right now. People want the answers now. They want to see the change quicker. People have less patience in the orthodontic treatment. And I think everyone who's listening, all the orthodontists listening, I think we can feel that pressure from our patients daily. So by being able to reduce treatment time by 6 months, 5 less office visits, that's a lot of time that we give back to our patients, right? So an example of that and what I experience every day is adult patients come in and they have an expectation that orthodontic treatment is 24 to 36 months. That's what it might have been 30, 40 years ago. I mean, it was they had friends, they experienced treatment 24 to 36 months. And so a lot of times that's why we hear, in my experience, adult patients say that I won't do braces. I can't wear braces because in their mind, that means they're going to have braces for 24 to 36 months. So when you see those patients and you're able to tell them, well, with LightForce and the data that's come out, average treatment times closer to 15, 16, 14 months. So you're able to tell a patient that would you wear braces for a year or a little over a year? And patients, their eyes get really big, especially adult patients, because it's to them, it's not at all what they expected. And my experience has been that most adults will agree that 12 to 14 months, they'll wear braces for 12 to 14 months. It doesn't mean that there's not a place, for other products in our practice, but we all know that some aligners are not as good at correcting certain problems. And we see those problems in our practice. And so having a solution that is acceptable to patients is huge.
Yeah, yeah, and we all know that clear aligner therapy has been on the increase, and there's a lot of pressure, and there's been a lot of advertising directly to the public about clear aligners. So they come in oftentimes, it's either clear aligners or nothing. I've had this experience in my practice. And as a clinician, I mean, there are certain cases that are clear aligner cases. And there are certain cases that I know I can't get the same result. Even with a hybrid, bracket and clear aligner combination, I still know that to get the best result, I need to have brackets on the teeth, and I could get that goal. So I wasn't willing to compromise my standard in terms of getting the result, but I found it increasingly difficult to talk patients, quote unquote, into braces because of the idea that it would, and it did take 24 months. If you use traditional brackets and wires, oftentimes on an adult case. So, this is an opportunity, it sounds to me, where you have a much better chance of explaining and educating to a patient that if you go this route, that we can treat you with a more consistent, predictable end result. Do you find that in the consults? Were you dealing with that as well?
Oh yeah, I mean, we deal it from the orthodontic perspective. We see the biomechanics, right? Aligners, clear aligners have certain advantages, but they have disadvantages. And there's certainly advantage to fixed appliances in biomechanically the way we can move the teeth. What we're able to do now when you're using a custom appliance that is more efficient is you're able to present a plan to the patient and that is best for them and then explain that to them so they can understand it, biomechanically, this is why this is best for you. And patients can have autonomy. They can make a decision. And there's lots of patients that value time. I think we're seeing that value their time more than the cosmetics. If they can use an appliance that will get them done 6 months faster or sometimes a year faster if there's a biomechanical advantage, I think that that's an easy answer for 90% of patients.
So when you talk about customized appliances, my first thought is, okay, so now the bases are matched to the anatomy of the tooth. So you're going to get you're not going to have a lot of excess composite trying to fill that gap. You have a better bond, probably have less breakage and things like that. And I get that part of it. But there's more to customized brackets than just the base. Could you talk a little bit about that? Because I know that I used to, well, when I was bonding a case up, I would offset brackets oftentimes to get rotations, but then that would throw off the torque in many instances and introduce some other variables, so it was a constant kind of cat and mouse game in terms of putting the brackets in a certain place to get rotational efficiency, but then you'd sacrifice, root position. So how do customized brackets deal with that issue?
Yeah, absolutely. And we've all direct bonding cases in varying bracket position for a mechanical advantage. We've all done that in our practice with traditional appliances. But just like you said, we're usually compromising in another area. So by repositioning that bracket, you compromise in the prescription of the bracket and the way it's shown. Additionally, traditional brackets have these prescriptions to counteract some of the biomechanics that we use in, let's say, class 2 correction. So my favorite example would be like an MBT prescription, for example, that has maybe 17 degrees of labial crown torque on upper incisors, right? So why do we have to add that prescription? It has to fit every patient. Many of American patients, we're treating a lot of class 2 malocclusion. So that prescription has that excessive torque to counteract what we do with elastics. But to make it work for every patient, there's a huge amount of bracket play, wire play in that slot, right? So an injection molded bracket has to be, number one, divergent walls of the slot, because you have to be able to take it out of the mold. But also it has a huge amount of slop in that bracket so that you can counteract some of the side effects of a non-prescription bracket and make it work for every patient. So with the LightForce prescription bracket, these custom brackets, really you only have like in an 018 bracket, for example, with a 1725 size wire, there's only 3 degrees of slop. That might be of a magnitude, same bracket, same size wire in an MBT injection molded bracket might be a magnitude of 30 to 20 degrees of slot play. So you're really going to get full wire engagement, gives you excellent torque control, okay, in our cases, which allows for your setup on the computer to look almost exactly match your final wire sequence.
So I don't want to get too deep into the weeds because this is just a short introductory kind of webinar. But do you mind sharing with our listeners what your typical wire sequence would be? How often you change them? How many wires typically do you use for an average case? Just kind of ballpark, because from the way you're describing it, it would seem that there's so much efficiency in the bracket that it doesn't have to have a lot of, wire changing and an adjustment. So is that true, or what's your thought?
No, absolutely. That's where a lot of the efficiency in this system comes in. So, initially it could be initial wire is unique. I try to make it unique for every patient, but it's going to be a round, flexible wire that you can get engagement into every bracket. So maybe for me in an 018 slot bracket, that might be like an 014 or 016 NiTi. And then after rotations are corrected, I can get full engagement of I call it a shaped wire, rectangular wire, that you want to engage that torque early on in treatment for most patients, especially since we know the torque is controlled and set up for that patient ideally. So my next wire might be a rectangular 1622 heat activated or NiTi wire that I can tie into every tooth. And this is where the efficiency really comes into play, because now, because we have a very predictable system, we have a custom bracket with ideal bracket positioning, we can trust that that wire and the bracket are going to interact together to move the teeth where we planned it. So it's not unusual for, once those wires are in place, a shaped wire, that I might not see a patient back for 14 weeks, 14, 15, 13 weeks before that patient returns to my office. And that's where the patient gains a lot of time, right? There are less visits into the office. That's how we save office visits. But also, when they come back, the teeth are going to be really straight. We've all been in that position where an assistant is light curing a direct bond bracket and accidentally bumps it just a little bit. So if you bump that bracket in a direct bond, 0.5 millimeter gingival, that patient's going to call you in about 3 weeks because the incisal edges don't line up. And they're going to want to come in to get that adjusted because that's a major concern. That is almost completely eliminated when you do a custom indirect bonding custom bracket system. So I'm finishing, and then after that 1622 heat activated or night tie wire, I'm finishing most of my cases in a 1725 full size heat activated wire. There's no need for finishing bends, almost zero need for finishing beds or rebonds in my practice. So there's no reason to finish in a PMA or stainless steel wire that you can permanently deform for a finishing bend. So in many cases, you're finishing in that 1725 full size night tie wire, which obviously that could, if you eliminate all of those wire changes, now you're not changing the wire 3 or 4 or 5 times during a treatment. So there's a huge efficiency gain just in by reducing the amount of wire changes you need to do in your practice.
So, I mean, I've never used LightForce. This might be a silly question, but the accuracy of the position of the bracket is so critical to the system itself. What happens in the middle of treatment if they break a bracket?
That's a great question because we all know we just had Halloween last night, right? So we might be getting calls this week about broken brackets due to candy and hard candies and all that. So what happens? What do? Well, you want the bracket to go into the exact same spot. So LightForce produces an individual rebonding tray for every bracket and an unlimited amount of rebond brackets. So, and you get that all with the initial case. So if that patient called this morning that they had a loose bracket, theoretically, you could have them in the office that afternoon and rebond that bracket very precisely with an individual rebond tray for loose brackets. So not only are we, by having a custom bracket that we can change the wire plane, move the brackets gingivally as needed to reduce the occlusal interferences, but now you have a rebond tray, so you can reposition that bracket precisely.
So you get a whole set of additional brackets to have in the office in case something like this happens?
Oh yeah, Leon, every case comes with an initial bonding trays, initial indirect bonding trays that are fabricated in sextants. So upper right quadrant, upper left quadrant,
Hmm.
anterior segment, which makes it very predictable in removal, right? So a lot of our debonds at initial bonding were due to the tray removal with indirect bonding in the past. Sextants makes it very predictable. And then you get along with those initial bonding trays, you get an individual bonding tray for every bracket. Okay, and then that can be reordered on a drop ship basis.
Understood. So I've heard you speak in the past about efficiencies, biological efficiencies and technical efficiencies. And I know that, from being around, being, in the profession as long as I've been, that I have been, we've seen a lot of quote unquote accelerators of orthodontic treatment come onto the market, go off of the market, come onto the market, a variety of different pulsing appliance, vibrating appliance. Everybody kind of knows some of the names. I don't even know if they're around or they're not around. I personally haven't used it. I don't know if they work or they don't work, but there wasn't a whole lot of science typically that I would see that would move the needle all that much. But I know, you know, shorter treatment times and fewer appointments are something that's important and has been important and will continue to be important. So there's different ways of addressing it. But you talk about it a little bit differently. Can you share that a little bit with the audience?
Absolutely. So I think that 10 to 15 years ago, it really became a major focus in orthodontics. And I think as the consumer, our patients changed, treatment time became more and more important. And the initial approach of orthodontists to reduce treatment time was all about modifying the biology of tooth movement, right? That's the way I see these vibrating tooth vibrators and osteoperforations. It was all about changing the biology to accelerate tooth movement. And in some areas, in some instances, it's been effective, others have not. And I think what we've learned over the last 10 to 15 years, that changing human biology is very difficult. It's probably not the area that we should be attacking to reduce treatment time. because biology is biology, and we have to do medication intervention to change that. So LightForce has taken the approach of, rather than changing the biology of tooth movement, let's make the tooth movement more efficient. So let's move the teeth to the right spot from the very beginning of treatment, rather than round tripping with an inaccurate initial bonding that needs to be rebonded later, or using a prescription that's ideal for a certain percentage of the population, but not every patient. So let's customize the treatment and the therapy so that the tooth moves efficiently to the right spot one time. And so we're not modifying the biology of tooth movement, but we're modifying the way we approach tooth movement. And that's kind of where that nature versus nurture, biology versus efficiency comes in to this discussion.
Understood. So I'm kind of keeping an eye on the clock, and I know that we have a bunch of questions from the audience, but I'd be remiss if I didn't bring up um, ask you this about your practice. Like, tell me the impact that it's had on your practice. Like, you've made these changes, you've adapted a new technology. We all know that, adding a new workflow is not easy in an orthodontic practice. It requires a lot of effort and change. Um, and we know that, technology is expensive, it costs. So, you have to spend if you're going to engage in it. So you've done all of these different things. So I'm curious, what has been the impact on your practice? How has it affected you as an orthodontist?
Well, you know as well as I do with your experience that change, human nature is to resist change, right? And I think that that's even more true in an orthodontic practice. When you have so many moving pieces every day in our practice, change can be very intimidating, and it can be very difficult. But I think when you look at the benefit that it can have on a practice, it makes that change, approaching that change, less intimidating. And when I use our practice, for example, has been deeply studied both by myself and by LightForce to see what has that change, what has the impact of that change been. And what we see in terms of patient treatment is a reduction by about 6 months in treatment time in my patients on average. So between traditional braces and LightForce, a reduction in 6 months in treatment time. And an average in my office, I think, was roughly 23 months. Average fixed appliance treatment was about 23 months. And we're seeing cases now finishing about 20 or 15, excuse me, 15 to 16 months is the average treatment time in my office. And then we saw a reduction in 5 office visits for that same patient base in that study. So 5 less office visits per treatment. So when you think about what the impact can be on your practice in your life, because really our practice is a huge part of our life, what that impact can be is, you got to imagine if you saw every patient 5 less times, how much that would open up your schedule. You're going to see a lot of more time available. How you utilize that time is 100% up to the practitioner, because everyone has different goals. Some people are going to utilize that time to continue to grow their practice, whether that means you have more time to visit with your referring doctors, participate in school activities to try to recruit more new patients, or whether you use that time to spend more time with your own family. Are you going to spend less time in working and more time enjoying life? I mean, we all get to make those choices. What that's looked like for my practice, we have a 2-doctor practice with my father. And in 2019, we worked about roughly 270 days, combining, both his days and my days together. We worked about 270 days. Last year, we worked 30 less days, and we're almost 100% integrated with all of our new bondings are with LightForce. So when you imagine what you could do with 30 more days of personal time versus that amount of time to continue to grow your practice outside of the clinic, it can be remarkable. And for us, that means that was to the tune of about a 50% increase in production from 2019 to last year. So we've seen a dramatic improvement in our efficiency. We've seen a dramatic improvement in how productive we can be, and how productive our time in the office is.
So, Andrew, I really appreciate you sharing everything that you've shared with us today. Your expertise, your insights, they're invaluable, and I'm sure that our listeners and viewers gained a lot of useful knowledge from the discussion. So I do want to save some time and open it up to some of the questions from the audience. But before we do that, I want to let you know that there is a special limited offer. Everybody likes a deal. So LightForce is sending some love to People in Practice listeners. And if you're interested, head over to the People in Practice partner page at pplpractice.com, and you'll find a LightForce and click on that, and they have a special offer for you. We'll include a direct link in the webinar chat line if you could do that, so that people could do that if they would like. I also, before we go to the questions, want to kind of loop in young practitioners and residents to think about what you want your practice to look like in the future. Because I do believe that the days, in my opinion, the days of like the 15 chair offices and the large footprints don't have to be that way. I think that you can do quite well in with a smaller footprint, fewer staff members, but maybe at a higher, level of performance, um, and do quite well if you leverage some of the available technology that's out there, like LightForce, for example. So, Lon, let's open it up. Anybody with any questions out there?
Absolutely. Thank you. Sure. So to start off, I think it kind of segues off of the last thing you guys were speaking about efficiency and shorter treatment times and less visits. So the question is, with the shift towards faster treatment, fewer appointments, are there any strategies you use to maintain a strong patient relationships and ensure quality outcomes? I guess how do you keep that relationship going when you're seeing them less over a less period of time?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And I think that there's lots of different ways to do that, to continue with your patient engagement. But in what I've experienced is that I'm able to spend kind of like, I guess the analysis would be like more quality time with the patients. So you have more, because your schedule changes and you have more time available, you're not rushing around to spend only less than 5 minutes, 1 minute, 2 minute with each patient. You're able to sit down and have a conversation. You're able to talk to your patients. And I think that means more to the patients than seeing them on a monthly basis. I think that there's a huge push in the industry right now that by some vendors, some products, that our patients don't want to see the orthodontist. And I don't think that's true. I think that our patients do want to see the orthodontist. I think they just want to see the orthodontist on their time. And so when you're able to meet the patient in that space, they're much more accepting, and they're much more appreciative of what we can do for them as a provider. So in my practice, to answer your question, I spend more time conversing with the patients at all their visits and getting to know them on a personal level, which is much more connective than seeing them on a monthly basis on a shorter interval for shorter appointments. We're able to connect on a deeper level, and it's had a huge impact with my patient connection.
And if I could just add that I do think there is a misconception among many orthodontists that your success has to do with the fact that they want to come in and see you and they enjoy, the conversations that you have, and there's a fear that, you might lose that, and they and distance the relationship. But I think Andrew brings up a really important point, which has to do with the quality of the relationship and the ability to provide them with more opportunity to spend with their family, less time out of school, less time out of work. These are things that, as a marketer, I could tell you, these are the critical points that patients that are important to moms. Moms are busy. The kids are scheduled. Um, between activities and sports and religious class and host of other things, it's not easy for them to juggle orthodontic appointments in. So if you can, and some of the ads that we run have to do with giving you back your time, which is music to the ears of a mom. So thank you, Andrew.
Of course.
Great, good answers. So I guess next, more another patient-centric question. What role does patient education play in the adoption of these new technologies? And are there any specific ways that you introduce or explain fully customized treatment options to patients?
Absolutely. So I think that you absolutely have to get credit for the big salad, right? I mean, we have to get credit for what we're doing when you're utilizing this technology. And I think it's a huge part of every new patient experience, certainly, because we're trying to set ourselves apart from what the competition might be doing, you know. It's changed dramatically in Arizona. It's a very competitive market, and having something that's different that patients can remember is huge, is some way for them to identify your practice amongst the second, third, and fourth opinions sometimes that patients are doing nowadays. But the analogy is very easy for patients. You can't walk into the mall, you can't watch an ad on TV without seeing how products are being customized for individual patients. I mean, Nike ID, being able to customize Nike shoes has been around a long time, but now you've got all sorts of brands where you can take measurements of your body at home and they'll make you a custom suit, for example. Save those measurements, custom shirts. So this isn't a new concept to the consumer, right? The consumer very well understands what mass customization is and personalization in their products are. So when you're able to share with them, because many of them don't have a really high dental IQ, they're not all orthodontists, they don't know the history of orthodontics. But when you're able to share with them that traditionally there's a drawer or cabinet in the orthodontic practice that has all the braces for every patient. Whoever walks in the door, whoever's sitting in the room is going to get the same bracket. And we're going to manufacture a custom bracket for you. When you're able to share that with the patient, that's not a hard concept for them to understand. They love consumers. And I think the consumer reports that are coming out are showing that patients want a personalized experience. And this segues right into a personalized experience for every patient.
Yeah, you bring up a really important point because from as a marketer, I could tell you that marketing is about differentiation. It's about defining who you are and what you stand for and how it compares to your colleagues and competitors in the area. And if you don't have anything that differentiates you, then you become more of a commodity to the end user, to the moms. And when you become a commodity, meaning, oh, I can get my braces here, I get my braces, that's a brace guy, that's another brace guy, I can go here or there. When you reduce to a commodity, then price becomes the determining factor. It's the way that it's human nature. I mean, why would you pay more for something if you believe that you're going to get the exact same thing? So it behooves us as orthodontists, and particularly now at a time when our business model is struggling, where the numbers are flat or have been on their way down. So the market isn't strong the way it used to be. It becomes incumbent upon us to not only differentiate our practice, but let the community know. Let them know that these technologies, if you're using them, are available and what it means to them. So that's a really good point, Andrew. I'm glad that you brought that up.
Great. Okay, this kind of goes along with that as well. Yeah, you talked about it a little bit, but this question from the audience is, has patient satisfaction changed with the adoption of fully customized brackets and indirect bonding? Are there specific patient feedback like trends that you're seeing from this?
Well, I think that the consumer, our patients, like we said earlier, are demanding faster treatment. They want to see results more quickly. And so, but they also have an expectation that the result is going to be just as good as it always has been. Just because we're using a custom appliance and we're doing indirect bonding and we're leveraging this technology to make the patient experience better and our experience better as providers doesn't mean that we're achieving, significantly better results just on, ABO measurements or an ABO standard. Orthodontists have been doing that for a long time, and we've been using variety of products. I mean, between from aligners to all the different styles of braces that exist, orthodontists can achieve excellent results. It's about meeting the patient with what their goals are and reducing that treatment time. So in terms of patient satisfaction, yeah, yeah, when we're able to finish treatments for like a simple mild crowding class 1 patient and you're able to get done in 4 visits in 9 months, patients are really satisfied. I mean, they're really wowed. Parents are wowed. Oh, this is so much better than it was for me, Johnny. Little Johnny, this treatment you should have seen when I had to wear headgear and I had braces for 6 years. And so, yeah, parents are wowed. And of course, young kids, they have no reference, but it does definitely, you're able to meet the patient's goals, right? We're able to get braces off before kids start high school. We're able to do accelerated treatment before a young person's wedding. So yeah, I think the satisfaction is not necessarily, I don't want to construe it that the results are going to be significantly better just based on occlusion, class 1 occlusion. Us orthodontists, we've always been able to achieve that. It's a question of is if you quantify the result in meeting the patient's expectations of what our patients expect today. Yes, there is a dramatic change in satisfaction.
Great. Okay. I think we have time for one last question. So here it is. What are some of the initial challenges you faced when incorporating a fully customized appliance technology, I guess, like LightForce into your practice? And how were they addressed by you?
Well, I think that there's two components to this question. It's a great question. And I think that's what new users are interested in to prepare for what the next step is. I think that there's a clinical component. And I think the most important thing clinically when we're introducing this technology is we have a tendency, I had a tendency to think, oh, I've got this custom appliance that I set up on the computer. It's built to be a straight wire appliance. So I'm just going to put wires in and magically the patient's going to come back in 12 weeks and everything's going to fit together and it's going to be a perfect treatment and it's going to make my life so much easier. And there's a tendency for us as providers with the new technology to kind of want to lean that way. And I think the most important thing to remember clinically is that this is still orthodontics, right? There's still a brace. And so whatever your mechanics are for class 2 correction, whatever your mechanics are for rotation correction, whatever your mechanics are for overbite correction, there's ways to leverage the technology to make it more efficient, but you still need to be able to utilize your orthodontic skills to treat every patient. So I think leaning into the fact that you have a custom appliance and leveraging that technology, but also remembering that you're still an orthodontist is really important clinically. And then the other component, I think, to this transition is going to be financially, right? So traditionally with fixed appliances, our overhead, our lab cost is relatively low, right? Fixed appliances can be relatively inexpensive. There is a lab cost associated with the LightForce system in terms of a 3D, a CAD CAM design, treatment planning software, an indirect bonding product, and a custom appliance. There is a lab fee associated with that that needs to kind of be accounted for, right? In modern orthodontics, it's hard to get patients to put anything down, to make any down payment. So you may struggle initially in a cash flow pinch of I have to pay this lab fee when I bond every case, but I haven't collected that money from the patient yet, I think is a common thing. And so I think that orthodontics, forever, orthodontists have been the bank, right? We've loaned our patients for their treatment and we've financed them at 0% for many years. And I think today the industry might be shifting to leveraging other products, other financial products that you didn't do before to account for some of those cash flow constraints. And then maybe increasing your motivation to patients and find ways to motivate patients to make a larger down payment. With that being said, it all catches up. So as your production goes, your cash flow is going to balance out. So there is a crunch for the first, I think that Chris Benson would say nine to 12 months, the first year, there's a crunch in cash flow that you have to make changes. But also, it has not affected my collections rate. So as we now, since treatment time is decreasing, I'm still finding that to get patients to accept treatment, because I'm not changing my treatment fee, is to extend payments beyond treatment time. And there's a huge, for obvious reasons, you're taking on a risk there that a patient isn't going to pay the bill once you've finished. But I think that you're going to find that out, and the research tells us, financial research tells us that you know whether a patient is going to pay their bill within the first 90 days. If a patient at the beginning goes past due in those first 90 days, they're going to be a financial risk throughout their whole treatment. And so being able to identify that with confidence, and then with confidence to either reassess what you're doing for that patient, motivate them to use some other form of financing for their treatment, or simply dismissing them from your practice because you shouldn't work for free, is probably something that we have to reassess on the way we look at that as providers. But I think that those two components, if you can understand the impact that will have on your practice from a clinical perspective and from a financial perspective, you're going to set yourself up really well to adopt this new technology, and you're going to see the benefits in your practice, certainly.
Yeah, you bring up a really important point, which is the cash flow. And we've dealt with this before in the past when clear aligners came into play and Invisalign came into play with all of a sudden now we had a $1,800, $2,000 lab fee associated with clear aligners, whereas we didn't have that when we were putting brackets on. So there is that impact that's going to be there. You mentioned a couple of things that I used that worked for me. One of them is instituting care credit. One of the bank companies that we were able to give them, 1 year interest free, for example, if they signed up, as long as they made their payments in a timely way. That was one strategy we used. We also re-incentivized payment in full. So, if you're giving 3% or 5%, we'd upped it to 7% and, tick that up. So just to get an influx of cash. The other important thing that you mentioned that is critical these days is it doesn't matter what your fee is. It really doesn't. What matters is the affordability of your fee. People are buying the monthly payment in general. People, I talk about this on the podcast oftentimes. Moms are buying $1,500 iPhones for their 10-year-olds, not because they're spending $1,500, but because Apple offers them $34 a month for 24 months or whatever. They could do the math and it comes out to $1,500, but they're looking at $34. So what you can't do, and I caution you, is that if you're going to get done in 9 months, don't try to squeeze all the payments into 9 months. That's not going to work. You can't have $400 a month or $450 a month and expect that to happen. And the data, and we collect a lot of data from our clients, the data shows that you can go 6 months and oftentimes you can go 9 months beyond treatment time and not significantly get burnt. And that's our fear is that if we end our active treatment, quote unquote, even though they're in retention and they're still our patients, that they're all of a sudden going to stop paying. The data doesn't prove that out. So you could be a little bit looser there. Of course, the caveat here is you have to have a good business financial structure. So your delinquency rate can't be 10% or 15%. If your delinquency rate is 3%, 2%, you can definitely afford to loosen up a little bit in order to start more cases. And then as you start more cases, as Andrew said, the cash flow evens itself out and it's not an issue. It's just that initial period of time that you do need to make some adjustment and prepare for.
Absolutely. I think that's perfectly on. You hit it right on.
Fascinating. Great. And the last question that we didn't get to had to do with cost concerns. So you guys addressed it. It's great. And we're right on time. So I thank you both. Um, I did put the link into the LightForce partner page that we have on our website for the discount with the offer. And then that will also be followed up in the emails that everybody gets of the recording of this episode. We're just about out of time here.
Yeah, well, one quick thing. First of all, thank you everybody for listening. And Andrew, if anybody has a question or a concern or something, is there a way that they could reach out to you directly and voice that question to you?
I think absolutely. I have no, of course, my office information online is a great resource, but also my email. I'll share my email with Lon, and he can share it with the users if they request to reach out to me. I'm passionate about this product. I think it works. I've seen the results in my practice, and I want other people to be able to experience it and have fun with this. And so I'm more than happy. I'm available. I'm a resource to anyone that has questions.
Great. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Lon. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Have a great weekend, and we'll see you next time.